Hello and welcome back to another video. Today's video is probably going to be a bit more erratic and all over the place than my normal video, because this is a video that's going to require me to be pretty negative for most of it. So the only part of this video that I've actually scripted out is this intro, and the entire rest of the video is just going to be me going over bullet points and certain bits of information I think we need to go over. But if you don't know, Dark Deception is a game that used to be really popular. It used to be in like the top 10 most recognizable mascot horror games of all time back in like the late 2010s. Like, you would see the Murder Monkeys put in artwork alongside Slender Man and fucking Freddy Fazbear. Like, it was that big at one point. But in recent years, Dark Deception has become one of those games that almost no one talks about or even remembers existed, despite the fact that the game is apparently still in active development, allegedly, but as I'll mention in this video, some of those claims that the game's still being developed are a little rocky. And after looking into this situation, spending months, honestly, debating on whether or not I should make a video about it, I think I have narrowed the cause of why the game has died out to one man's ego, who I think has destroyed what was for a long time one of my favorite indie horror games. So let's just start going over the bullet points now that we are no longer in the scripted section of this video. Okay, so first I did actually want to start off with some positives about why this used to be one of my favorite indie games of all time. First off was that this is a game that had genuinely interesting gameplay. Any of the gameplay I show in the background is probably going to be from trailers or other people's playthroughs. I have played all 8 chapters that are currently out of Dark Deception. In fact, I've played some of the chapters multiple times, but I do not currently have a working computer or PC, so I was unable to download the game to get any new footage. But this is a game that genuinely had a really fun gameplay loop with a Pac-Man style run from the enemies while collecting the little pellets, or in this case, soul shards. And the fact that each different level had its own main villain, its own storyline, and its own setting made it so that each new chapter of the game and each new level of the game felt completely unique to the last. But the one main complaint I do have with the actual gameplay of Dark Deception is that the difficulty scaling in this game is so bad. I do mostly blame the chapter structure that the game is being released in for this, because it seems like the goal was to have the last level of each chapter be super hard to kind of be a big grand finale. But when you play the game all at once, because it's not like Bendy and the Ink Machine or Poppy Playtime where the gaps between chapters are like immediately obvious. Like, there's really no reason Murder Monkeys had to be a completely different chapter from the fucking gold guys or whatever they're called. I can't remember their names right now. But like, the first level of the game I'd say is like maybe second hardest level of the entire game. And then you get to level 2, which is definitely way easier. And then you go right into level 3, which, like I said, is the gold people. I think they're called Gold Watchers. I'm going to call them that from now on, unless I remember their actual name. And that is often considered to be the hardest level in the entire game. Go from really hard level, really easy level, really hard level, and then you'll get like 2 really easy ones, and then a hard one. It's just weird. But other than that, the game itself is really good, and none of the complaints I'm going to be levying in this video are towards the actual game itself. It is a really well-made game, even though there are some glitches, but I typically don't hold glitches against the game itself, since pretty much every game nowadays releases half-finished, so Dark Deception is at least better in that end. Okay, you remember how I mentioned that the game did have several glitches earlier? Well, this actually led to the first major public controversy with the game, because the release of the game's 4th chapter is really where everything started to go wrong for the game. This was a big release. It had been built up for years. There was the biggest gap between chapters of almost 2 years between 3 and 4 before this was released. And it was also going to be the biggest release of levels in the game's history, with 3 levels instead of the normal 2. So people were hyped, myself included. But the game came out, and it was riddled with glitches, and unfortunately, this led to the game getting a lot of backlash. Now, I do actually quite enjoy all three of these levels. I think all three of them are very creative. I think some of them lean a little too much into the mascot horror vibe that Dark Deception gets lumped into, because it was really on the rise around the early 2020s when Chapter 4 released. But other than that, I really do enjoy all of Chapter 4. The problem that many had with the game was just how glitchy it is. Like, it was security breach levels of glitchy on release for some people. And this would end up being the thing that kind of spirals into everything else that we're going to talk about in this video, and every other controversy and everything keeping the game from being released. Okay, so as I said, a lot of backlash for how glitchy Chapter 4 was. And I don't really know the full context behind the tweet I'm about to show you, because some of the tweets involved in this have been deleted now, and I don't feel like going through three people's whole Twitter pages to read the full argument, but I'm gonna read this tweet out to you and let it speak for itself. Watch the Skies says, "You deleted this tweet, but I saw this at Vincent Livings. Have something you wish to say?" And then we get sent what seems like the main coder of the first 4 chapters, Nixon, saying to someone who he was arguing with, "That doesn't say anything. There's more than 5 people working on the game. It's not my fault the game released in that state it did. It certainly wouldn't have if it were up to me. Your point sucks." To which Vincent Living replies, "So whose fault were all those bugs? Last I checked, you were the only coder." So it seems like he kind of attacked the sole coder of his biggest project ever, and then deleted his tweet when he got caught. Now, whether or not you do think a coder is completely to blame for the state of a game, it does still go to show that Vincent kind of knew he was being an asshole by publicly attacking him on Twitter, considering he did eventually delete the tweet later before being called out for it. Now, as you can imagine, publicly throwing daggers at the guy who pretty much is the sole reason your game even gets made and finished isn't the best business strategy. And based on some of Nixon's recent tweets, it seems like he has moved on to other projects. It seems like he has completely moved away from Dark Deception. And in this tweet you can see he posts, "Hey y'all, hope 2026 is treating you well. I've been busy with a section of the game that's staying secret until release, almost done. This means new content is coming. Expect around 1 post per month, in-engine or gameplay whenever possible. TJOC is now my full-time focus." So that means that the lead programmer of the first 4 chapters of the main game has now completely left. And if you're someone who's been in the Dark Deception community, you'll know that there's been a lot of backlash recently for all the spin-off projects that Vince seems to be prioritizing over the main game. And my personal theory is that the game has either barely been coded or not been coded at all since Nixon left. Because you expect me to believe that the game is finished enough that Vince has multiple times said that he's confident it will release in a certain time frame, but that the game at the same time is also so unfinished that 5 years into its supposed development cycle, we still don't have a gameplay trailer for it. Like, those two things just contradict. And it's pretty much become a running joke at this point that Vince continuously promises to release Dark Deception Chapter 5, and then it doesn't come out in the time frame. But we will talk more about that in the next section. Okay, this section is going to be kind of just sporadically going over a bunch of informations and stuff that people kind of clown on Vince for, that I think more people deserve to know about who aren't in the know of the Dark Deception community but might still be expecting Chapter 5 and wanting to play it. So first off is very soon after the release of Chapter 4, Vince put out a poll asking us if we wanted him to release Chapter 5 in parts. And the option to release Chapter 5 in 2 parts was the one that won. And he even made an official announcement saying that Chapter 5 was going to be released in 2 parts. The first part was going to be levels 9 and 10, and the second part was going to be levels 11, 12, and 13. Which, first off, I just need to say, why even bother with the chapter structure then? I think I mentioned this earlier, if I remember correctly, but Dark Deception has never been like Bendy and the Ink Machine, or Poppy Playtime, or a more recent example, Indigo Park, where each chapter of the game is essentially its own completely unique game. Like, the different games are pretty much completely unique from each other, to the point where, when it comes to Poppy Playtime, most people don't even treat that as one long game. They treat it as 4 smaller games. Or I guess maybe by the time this video comes out, Chapter 5 will have released and it'll have been 5 smaller games. But Dark Deception is level-based, so there's like no real separation between the chapters. Like, you would not immediately be able to tell that the Carnival level and the Murder Monkeys level are from completely different chapters, other than the fact that you have a little more upgrades in Chapter 5, or in Level 5. But, tangent out of the way, he said this, like, 4 years ago. And here we sit in 2026, we still don't have any of the levels. And I've even seen this brought up as a common defense of him, is people saying that Chapter 5 is going to be the longest of the game's history, and it's going to be 5 chapters, or 5 levels long, and that's why it's taking so long. Even though that defense doesn't really work, when the person in charge of the game literally publicly promised that he was going to not do all 5 chapters or levels at once, and that he was going to be doing 2 releases of it. He just changed his mind because he realized that it looked a lot worse if it took him 5 years to get 2 levels out than if he said that it was taking him this long to get 5 levels out. And also, I do want to say, if you don't know, Chapter 5 is actually only going to be the end of a third of Dark Deception. He has talked in the past about wanting to do 3 arcs of Dark Deception, and he's never, to my knowledge at least, never really made it clear whether he means this as he's going to make more chapters after Chapter 5, or if he's just going to make 2 completely separate games. But either way, this is only like a third of the story, and the earliest version of Dark Deception came out in 2014. So this means that we have been waiting 12 years now for a third of this game, which I just personally think is a little unacceptable, especially when you consider that 3 guys managed to throw together Hollow Knight in like half a decade, and that 1 guy was able to make all 5 Fears to Fathom games in like 4 years. But another thing that I don't really see many people talk about is the overabundance of spin-off titles, which I personally think are to distract from how long the game's taking to release. We saw pretty much this exact strategy between the releases of Poppy Playtime Chapters 2 and 3, where it was almost a 2-year-long gap, and to kind of distract people from how long it was taking, they released a multiplayer game called Project Playtime to kind of hold people over. But all it ended up doing was making Chapter 5 take even longer to develop. And that seems to be the same case here. We have Monsters and Mortals, Enhanced, and Super Dark Deception all being worked on, as well as multiple DLC crossover things for Monsters and Mortals. And as I was working on this video, he just announced that he is also working on an offline mode for Monsters and Mortals. Now, what I find especially upsetting, to me at least, is that one of the reasons Chapter 4 took so long is that they were working on Dark Deception Enhanced, which was a remake, upgraded remake of the first 5 levels. And then they released that, and then Chapter 4 came out. But now they are doing Dark Deception Enhanced Plus, which is a redo of the first 8 levels again. So it's like, what the fuck was the point of remaking Chapters 1 through 5 if you were just going to have to remake them again a few years later. It's like, this is just pointless dev time. Bendy and the Ink Machine did a similar thing where they kind of went back and they revamped all of their old chapters later. The difference is that Bendy and the Ink Machine was actually able to get all 5 of its chapters out within 2 years, and then it went back and did the upgraded versions. Meanwhile, Vincent Livings keeps pausing the development of his game to do the 3rd version of the first level. It's like, what? Actually, the 4th version of the 4th level, because like I said, the original version of that level came out in 2014. So it's like, what the fuck is the point of this? I feel like I've kind of rambled along in this section enough. Another thing, the last thing I want to mention is his fucking ego. This man, he finally started getting some backlash for all of like the blatant lies. Like, he has promised the release of Dark Deception Chapter 5 like 10 times now. And he has started frequently posting on Twitter about the haters and how the haters are spreading lies and trying to make the game look bad. Like, legit some fucking yandere dev portraying himself as an anime girl and his critics as goblins type shit. Okay, so yeah, I ended that last section by mentioning Yandere Dev, and I actually decided to kind of add a little section in here because Yandere Dev, or as I'm probably going to refer to him through most of this, Alex, is probably known as maybe the most hated indie game developer of all time. Like, at least of the ones alive right now, he is maybe the most hated game developer right now. And I just personally think it's crazy how much Vince currently parallels how Yandere Dev was at the worst and at the height of his whole controversy. Because the way they talk about criticism is almost exactly the same. The way they have talked about people who work under them is exactly the same. And they've even both recently, in Vince's case, had some very unsavory things. I don't want to say accusations in Vince's case, because if you know what I'm talking about, the person in question in the situation we're going to get to hasn't officially thrown any accusations out at Vince, but they've pretty heavily implied that Vince was abusive to them, and they've continued to let the Dark Deception community believe that Vince is abusive to them and have never clarified it, so clearly there's something going on there. I'm not going to argue whether domestic abuse or preying on a minor or sexting a minor. I'm not here to argue which is worse. So if you think one's worse and that I shouldn't be comparing the two, I'm sorry, but the fact that both of them in the past few years have had massive bombshell allegations or whatever drop about them is again another really weird parallel between these two developers. And the thing is, Vince has apparently interacted with Yandere Dev in some form, because at one point there was going to be a full-blown Yandere Dev DLC for Monsters and Mortals before it was canceled, I think due to backlash for the collab. But this was well into all the controversies with Yandere Dev. I imagine, given how online Vince is, he knew about everything Yandere Dev had done up to that point, and yet he was still willingly choosing to associate his game with that game just to pull in a few clicks, because Monsters and Mortals is one of those games that's like always dying. And another thing that Yandere Dev and Vince have in common, I do think Yandere Dev / Alex is way worse with this, but both have been seriously kind of passive aggressive to the fan communities. Now again, Alex is way worse with this. Like, he literally took a fan game down and then he shouted at fans asking why it had to be taken down. Vince has never done anything like that to my knowledge, but about a year ago, maybe a little closer to 2 years ago now, Vince put up a live stream saying, "Don't get sued, Dark Deception livestream legal Q&A." Now, I'm not someone who likes to sit down and watch Q&A live streams. I have sat through about the first 30 minutes of this, and it really does just seem like him saying, "Hey, I don't want you to monetize a fan game based off of me," which, like, fair. Scott Cawthon has said the same thing, but implying that you would sue a smaller fan creator because they monetize their work that was inspired by you, I think is a little wild, considering that, yeah, they probably shouldn't be monetizing a game that is very clearly Dark Deception based in a fan game, but, I mean, take Scott Cawthon, for example. I don't believe he's ever actually sued a fan game that was monetized. I think that in the past he's had games taken down for being monetized and being a fan game, but he's never sued anyone, to my knowledge. Especially since we've had almost nothing for the main game for 5 years. So these fan games are pretty much the only thing keeping your fan base alive right now, and you're threatening to sue them rather than putting that time and energy towards actually getting your game out. Another thing, and it just really leads into the biggest parallel between Alex and Vince, is just their fucking egos. Their egos are goddamn massive. Both of them think they can do no wrong, and both of them have pretty much destroyed the reputation of what would otherwise be a very beloved, popular game, probably, without the controversies. Or, I mean, Yandere Simulator maybe less so, because it's still Yandere Simulator, still got some gross stuff in it, but it was a very beloved game by a lot of people before the main controversies with him started. And I think that Dark Deception is very much going down the same route, which, as I mentioned earlier, I love this game. I don't want it going down the Yandere Simulator route. I want this game to be the best game it can be. Okay, the last bullet point I wanted to go over was the abuse, not allegations, because again, there's been no official allegations, but the implications that Penn Livings has made about being abused. First off, some of you might think, oh, maybe it's just some weird marketing for the game, because the main character of Dark Deception is a man who was heavily implied to be kind of abusive to his partner, so maybe this was some like weird version of marketing that just went off the rails. But I feel like if that was the case, some sort of statement would have been made already. And to my knowledge, neither Penn Livings or Vincent Livings have made a statement about why this Morse code was there to clear things up. In fact, if I remember correctly, Penn Livings' Twitter has actually gone offline since this whole thing happened, which to me is kind of proof that something's going on here. But basically, Dark Deception fans spotted on Penn Livings' Twitter that she had Morse code in her bio, which is something that I think she's known to do. But when people translated the Morse code, they found that it read, "I am abused." And I decided to check for myself to make sure that this wasn't just some people making it up, saying that the Morse code read something it didn't. I plugged it into my own Morse code translator, and sure enough, it reads, "I am abused," which implies some things about Vince. Now, obviously, this message doesn't clarify who she was being abused by, but I feel like the obvious implication is Vince, and again, I feel like Vince would have come out to defend himself if he knew it was false. Because Vince is not that ignorant about what goes on in his own fan base. He knows people are talking about this, so I feel like if he knew for a fact he was innocent, he would have came out and said something. Or he would have had Penn clarify, hey, this is what's going on, I meant it for this person, don't attack Vince. And I feel like this isn't a situation that's talked about online, outside of like the Dark Deception subreddit. So I feel like I kind of just wanted to mention this in this video to get that out there, that there is heavy implications that Vincent Livings was abusing Penn Livings for a period of time recently. Okay, first off, I want to thank all of you who actually managed to sit through what is essentially a 25-minute video of me just rambling on and on and on about this random indie horror game's developer. But yeah, a lot of what is holding the game back really does just seem to be Vince's ego-fueled rants. And it is ego. I cannot see these decisions being fueled by anything other than ego. Him deciding to come out and publicly post insults and jabs at the one guy developing the main game on Twitter, leading to him leaving. Him threatening to sue other indie projects that are inspired and based off of his game. Him calling anyone who criticizes him or the game haters instead of just taking their criticism into account. Like, it is all just him having a really massive ego. And while I don't think it's likely at all, I do hope that maybe someday he can set the ego aside and we'll finally get this game. I don't think it's likely, but there's always a chance, right? Well, anyways, thank you for watching once more, and I will see all of you in hopefully a much happier video next time.